Одессу и Харьков, и Киев мы потихоньку идем, но благодаря всем структурам, подразделениям и нациям, вероисповеданиям, которые сегодня объединились вокруг призыва нашего президента, мы сегодня показываем такие показатели, которые даже не снились Западу и натовским государствам, и Евросоюзу. Иншаллах, пробьемся и дойдем до Польши, которая кричит вовсю, хотя у них нет никаких возможностей.
That was Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov after he met with leaders of the Chechen army sometime in late 2023. Some will now say he was telling the truth, given the recent reports about a major Russian offensive to the Kharkiv province that began this morning sometime around 5 a.m. However, having watched how the Russians conduct their offensive operations over the last 2 years, and especially how Yevgeny Prigozhin lured the Ukrainian army into a death pit in Bakhmut for months through massive information, I take a slightly different interpretation of Mr. Kadyrov's comments than most would. But before I tell you my theories, let's get up to date on the build-up to the events that broke out this morning in Kharkiv. So let's get into it. So for months, Ukrainian officials were warning of a possible Russian offensive to the Kharkiv region, which is a northeastern province of Ukraine that abuts the Luhansk oblast, which is a Russian separatist region and forms part of the Russian land bridge that runs from Kherson to Luhansk that Russia occupied since 2022. And for those of you who may not be the most keen or dedicated followers and observers of this war, Kharkiv Oblast had come to light in the fall of 2022 when Ukraine launched a surprise offensive and was able to recapture a large amount of territory from the Russian army in just a few days. I believe at that time the Russian army had only occupied about 20% of the Kharkiv region. Although it was touted as a major victory for Ukraine and a game changer and bringing the Russian army on the brink of collapse, later reports revealed that it was largely a Pyrrhic victory, as Russia had abandoned the territory long before the Ukraine's offensive. And I made a detailed report about that, which you can watch. Click on this corner of the screen. So now, almost 2 years later, Ukraine's military command has become increasingly concerned about what they were seeing in the Belgorod region, which is a province in Russia that borders Kharkiv, and from which any offensive to Kharkiv from Russia would likely occur. But the news is still coming out, but I will take you through the articles leading up to today's latest reports. The 20th of April, AP News reported that things had been relatively quiet in the northeast of Ukraine until a wave of airstrikes began from the Russian army sometime in late March. Russia had begun exploiting the air defense shortages in the Ukrainian army in the second largest city to pummel the Kharkiv regions in energy infrastructure. Kharkiv was once a city that housed approximately 1.3 million residents, and now nearly 200,000 of those residents were completely without power. Some officials began warning that this wasn't an isolated strike, but could be a concerted Russian effort to shape conditions for a summer offensive to seize the city. So the first aerial attack had begun on the 22nd of March, and it completely annihilated Kharkiv's ability to generate and distribute electricity. According to reports around then, Russia had launched some 22 missiles, which took about 30 seconds from the Belgorod region in Russia to reach its targets in Kharkiv, which is about 30 kilometers away. Energy workers in Kharkiv, therefore, had a mere 30 seconds to find cover. By the 3rd of May, Ukrainian officials seemed far more certain of what was coming. One defense official, a Major General Skibitsky, predicted that Russian forces could launch an offensive to the eastern regions of Kharkiv and Sumy by late May, June. He said that the likelihood that the offensive would depend on the battlefield, but indicated that given the size of the Russian forces deployed along the border with Belgorod, it indicated to him that they will fall short of seizing major Ukrainian cities, such as Kharkov. But by May 7th, the Atlantic Council reported that Russian bombing was decimating Kharkov and believed that it was a Russian strategy to depopulate Kharkov ahead of a summer offensive to take the city. The outflow of people was quoted as having an impact on the local economy, as companies were reluctantly shutting down while others were beginning to put up their businesses for sale. So by this time, an estimated 300,000 people remained in the city of Kharkov. Despite the looming threat, the author of the article believed that given the difficulty that the Russian armed forces has had in capturing smaller towns such as Bakhmut and Avdiivka, they thought it was far from certain that Russia could take Kharkiv. Then around the 9th of May, Al Jazeera reported that Ukrainian reports were now speaking of a worrying buildup of Russian troops on its northern border in Belgorod. The aforementioned Ukrainian Deputy Military Intelligence Chief, Mr. Vadim Skibitsky, he said that Russia was possibly preparing to make a renewed attempt to capture both Sumy and Kharkov, and he told The Economist in an interview that Russia had concentrated some 35,000 troops north of the Ukrainian border, and that Russia would launch them into Ukraine sometime in late May or June. However, this figure of 35,000 troops was later contested by another Ukrainian military observer who put the number closer to 50,000 Russian troops. So what about Ukraine's defenses in the area? Well, at that time, Ukrainian parliamentarians had told Al Jazeera that Ukraine maintains tens of thousands of troops in the north, far from the active battlefield fronts, precisely for such an eventuality. The current commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army, General Syrskyi, said he was sending more artillery and tanks that he said was sorely needed on the active fronts to bolster the northern forces. So at this point, you have to ask yourself, why would General Syrskyi be giving such information to the public domain? Is this a sign of the fog of war? Is it attempts by Ukraine to make the Russians believe that there's more resistance than there really is? More importantly, I ask, it raises the question of, can Russia really take a massive city like Kharkiv with only somewhere between 35,000 to 50,000 troops? Does Ukraine really have tens of thousands of reserve troops, as was said, available to defend the border between Kharkiv and Belgorod? Is this another Russian feint to pull troops away from Donetsk, where I think the primary Russian goal is? So at this stage, I was still on the assumption that a Russian buildup around the Kharkiv region was similar to the Russian buildup in Belarus. That was a mere distraction. So anyway, the following day, that being the 8th of May, the Kiev Independent cited the governor of the Kharkiv region, who also commented on the Russian group of forces and the intensified attacks with missiles, glide bombs, and drones by the Russian army on the Kharkiv region. A commander of the Ukraine's National Guard, Alexander Pivnenko, he said that Russia would need years to occupy Kharkiv. But as of today, it does seem like Russia intends to make good on this threat to Kharkiv. Several articles have come out this morning reporting on this brewing Russian offensive.
Росія почала нову хвилю контрнаступальних дій на цьому напрямку. Україна зустріла їх там нашими військами, бригадами і артилерією. Важливо, що вони можуть збільшувати і підтягувати ще сили в цьому напрямку, це факт. Але наші військове командування знали про це і розраховували свої сили для того, щоб зустріти вогнем ворога. Зараз йде жорстокий бій в цьому напрямку. Артилерійським вогнем.
Reuters said that Russian forces tried to break through into the border in the Ukraine's northeast Kharkiv region with armored vehicles and heavily shelled the area. According to Ukrainian officials, Ukraine reportedly repelled this armored attack, but fighting continues in the border areas of Kharkiv, as Kiev, and this might be important, sent more reserves to the area. So go back and watch my video called Musical Chairs, where I outlined what I suspect was the Russian offensive plan for this summer. Also, watch the video on attrition wars, which gives appropriate context to attrition strategy. Attack everywhere, causing Ukraine to thin their defensive lines and commit all the reserves to certain points on the front line and only press where there's a breakthrough, just like what occurred recently in the Ocherotine salient, the Donetsk oblast. So to me, I don't think Russia has any stated plan or goal of taking Kharkiv city. They are simply executing a broad offensive across the entire front in this second and final phase of attrition. That's my assessment. So Barron's then reported also today that the Russian assault began at 5 a.m. this morning. And though it was initially repelled by the Ukrainian armed forces, fighting of varying intensity was ongoing and Russia launched several aerial strikes. High-ranking Ukrainian military source said that Russia had advanced into Ukraine by 1 kilometer and was trying to create a buffer zone. Russia's defense ministry said that it had captured 2 villages in the Kharkiv region. This week, the German newspaper DW confirmed this Russian advance of 1 kilometer into the Kharkiv region near the city of Volchansk, they say, which is about 30 miles northeast of Kharkov. The evacuation of civilians is currently underway, and based on a report from an unnamed high-ranking Ukrainian official, DW was able to report that Russia was aiming to advance as much as 10 kilometers into the region in an effort to establish a buffer zone. Now, according to Newsweek, the Ukrainian blogger, well-known blogger, Deep State, wrote that the available resources that were being used by the Russian enemy at the moment in Kharkiv will not be enough for a deep advance. Currently, Russia appears to be attempting to just destabilize the border, but it is not known how many main forces Russia is ready to use for this maneuver, according to Deep State. Another Ukrainian analyst, Taras Berezovets, wrote on Telegram that not a single meter had been lost and that the Russian enemy group does not pose a threat to Kharkov. Its forces, she said, are sufficient only for provocations in the northern direction. In my earlier video on the Ukrainian Kharkov offensive in 2022, I cited the very same Taras Berezovets who claimed that the Kherson offensive, and get this, was really a feint to allow for the real attack in the Kharkiv offensive, which of course is total nonsense, and I made that clear in my video. So we can take all of her reports with a heavy dose of salt. Now, Russian military bloggers suggested that the drive could either be one of 2 things. It could be intended to take Kharkov, or simply to sow panic among more than 1 million residents left in the city. Other channels suggested that the intention may be to simply create a buffer zone along the border with Belgorod to prevent further raids into Russia by Ukrainian aligned formations, as we have seen recently. This seems to me to be the most probable speculation. Then there's another theory from a member of the Ukrainian parliament, Mr. Alexander Merezko. He thinks that the Russians just want to scare people living in Kharkiv to cause a wave of refugees perhaps to western Ukraine and further destabilize the economic situation. He said quite logically that Russia can only take Kharkiv if they manage to either completely destroy the city and make it look like a Stalingrad or Aleppo. He thinks that attempting to take the Kharkiv city will have huge casualties on the Russian army. And I think that's a sensible analysis, which begs the obvious question: why did everyone just believe that Russia was trying to take Kiev with probably less than the 50,000 troops that is situated around Kharkiv back in 2022, when Kiev was even a bigger city? But the same logic should apply here. But just remember, everything started today at 5 a.m., so let's wait and see how this unfolds. My expectation is that the Russian attacks to Kharkiv will die down as Ukraine commits more of its reserves to the area and stretches themselves out even thinner. This will then make the opportunity ripe and a perfect setup for another push to take Donetsk this summer. If I am correct, then just like Prigozhin's antics around Bakhmut, which I documented in a very long video that you can find right here, Ramzan Kadyrov's words in the clip at the beginning of this video from his statement last year is just more misinformation to get Ukraine to commit reserves and expose more vulnerable areas for Russian penetration. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is this a real Russian offensive or just another feint and distraction?